CEOs. I understand how these people tick, and this will be a strong point for me as governor, one that's experience that Governor Strickland doesn't have.
Well, no, Governor Strickland never had a direct conversation with the CEO of Lehman Bros, Richard Gould. He never spoke glowingly about that relationship, both with the CEO and second in charge of Lehman. Had the governor had the chance to speak to the CEO of Lehman Brothers, I would point out that he probably had the same conversation that he had with the former CEO of NetJets, or Scott's, or The Limited, or Nationwide, or Grange, or Progressive, or any other Fortune 50, Fortune 100 corporation headquartered here in the state of Ohio or outside of the state of Ohio, who the governor has had a very strong working relationship with, helping to build our state's economy. Had he had the conversation with the CEO of Lehman Brothers, the governor perhaps would ask the question, what on earth are you doing? How can you bet against your company, which is essentially what Lehman did, on these risky ventures? And why, in the case of John Kasich, as he's pointed out, just a couple hundred managing directors in the business, why didn't John Kasich or anyone else, with the exception of a couple who've written books, speak up at the time during the course of those 9 years and ask the same kinds of questions that John Kasich likes us to think that he was asking at the time? It's quite frankly two different things. He says one thing today, he ignores the last 8 years. And while when asked, Joe, he will respond about his experience at Lehman Brothers. It's nowhere on his website. It's not formally part of his campaign. And only when pressed does he use the words that you subscribe to him to speak about his experiences at Lehman.
Did you see anything in the 2008 listings that he did release that jumped out at you as being out of the ordinary for somebody in that position?
The day John Kasich announced for governor, we called the Speakers Bureau and we asked if he was available to speak at a paid speaking engagement on primary night 2010. We were assured that they were still taking scheduled appointments for John Kasich, including that night. Now, to Bill's question about the money he made in 2009, if it was the case that he was still taking paid public appearances, private appearances, we'd just like to know about it. Because frankly, I would like to hire John Kasich for primary night 2010. I would like that to happen. I would commit $15,000 to John Kasich personally if he were to speak at this kind of event. The fact is that he wants us to believe two different things. First, that he's being open in transparency, and second, that news dumping on Good Friday is going to suffice. And in the curiosity that I and 11.5 million Ohioans, maybe I can't speak for all of them, have about the background of John Kasich and his financial dealings.
Kasich listed 3 speakers, bureaus, or people. Which one did you guys call?
We can get you that information too as well. Jennifer Steiner's done research. We'll get that to you by the end of the day, Joe.
Of course, Republicans pushing back that there was sort of a deal that if Kasich released any of his tax returns, the governor would release his health records. How do you respond to that?
The governor's indicated that John Kasich releases all of his financial records. The governor would release his health records. And you didn't have to set an appointment to see Ted Strickland to ask him the question. I suspect when you see him this week, you could ask him the same thing, and he'll be as open as he was then. Now, he was obviously egging John Kasich on because he knew then what we all have come to find out after the Good Friday news dumping. John Kasich is not going to release all of his financial records for the past 9 years. And as John Kasich's spokesperson pointed out, some years the bonuses went up, some years they went down.
Chris,
we just like to know.
Chris, are you saying that the governor made that statement knowing he would never have to release his health records?
You follow up on Joe's question. He has said that he knows how to sit down and deal with CEOs. I don't know if he does or not, but he's also said that he would know how to sit down and deal with a CEO like Mr. Nudi of NCR that Governor Strickland was unable to persuade you to come to a meeting.
Right.
Do you think Kasich can make a credible argument that he could do a better job than Governor Strickland at wooing reluctant CEOs to at least consider staying in Ohio?
As you know, the CEO of NCR didn't live here, had no relationship with the state, lived in other places, and was committed, as far as we can understand, to moving NCR out of Dayton to Atlanta, to suburban Atlanta, correct? And that the efforts to reach out to NCR were dismissed, not just from the governor's perspective, but also from Senator John Husted, who is, I believe, still employed by the Dayton Chamber of Commerce, and other regional leaders, Republican and Democrat. I would also like to remind folks that the governor's direct involvement with keeping and then expanding and relocating NetJets, his work with Scott's, his work with the 6 or 7 companies I just listed, has been ignored at times by John Kasich and his camp. I understand they're trying to find areas of weakness, but in the case of NCR, it appeared to be a fait accompli much far sooner than anyone had expected. Far earlier, I should say.
Will you take a question on whether?
Sure.
I don't know if you would agree with this characterization, but so far it seems that the Fisher-Bruner race has been pretty tame. I think a lot of us thought that by now they would be kind of clawing at each other. Is that as a result of a request from you or Governor Strickland, or just, do you think it, how do you characterize it? Is it going to get nastier, or just what do you think?
Well, if you've been watching the Republican auditor primary and the U.S. Senate primary on the Democratic side, they seem like 2 different races, not based on the race itself, but on how they're unfolding. In the case of our Senate race, I've had numerous conversations with both the Secretary of State and the Lieutenant Governor, as well as their top campaign staffers, reminding them that they do risk alienating the base, the Democratic base, by attacking each other. And I think both Lee and Jennifer didn't need that reminder because of their past success electorally speaking. So I'm optimistic that we'll continue to have an above-the-table dialogue between these 2 candidates, and that the voters will respond this May.
Chris, now that we've had a few days, what is your perspective on the Chief Justice position? Do you think it's something that the governor should appoint a temporary replacement, or appoint somebody who's running for the job now?
Several years ago, I was the minority leader in the House, and the Chief Justice made a point of coming to see me as often as he came to see the Speaker. I will never forget that. The Chief Justice and I had a personal relationship as well. I knew the Chief Justice from his summer home up in Catawba, so I had already known him. And he came from Sandusky, which was part of my former legislative district, and he had from there, he was born there and raised at Sandusky High School. And so I had a relationship with him, but he always reached out to me in a balanced way. He never looked beyond those of us who happen to serve in the minority. And I've never forgotten that, and I'll never forget that. And having known him, and I think he would appreciate the fact that now we allow his family just to remember those good memories and think about those thoughts this week, and allow the politics to play out days and weeks later. I haven't really focused on that, nor will I, until an appropriate time, and no decisions have been made, no conversations have taken place. It is a week when we think about Tom Moyer's service to Jim Rhodes, to the people of the state of Ohio, as a private attorney, as then an appellate judge, and now a Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, longest serving in the nation.
What do you think of the governor's suggestion of renaming the Judicial Center?
Well, it's something that the legislature, I believe, and the governor would take up, and it's owned by the state of Ohio. I think naming goes through the legislature. I think that there's widespread support for the legacy of Tom Moyer, and if this is a way to reflect that, I think it's appropriate that the legislature and the governor take up that discussion. I know on both sides you've seen President Harris and Minority Leader Batchelder, Speaker Budish, and Minority Leader Cafaro have their own sets of stories about Tom Moyer, and I think it's a good week that we should take these and reflect on these stories, and if the legislature wants to make that move, it's in the legislature, Jermaine, and certainly I see no reason why I would not support it.
Getting back to